They didn't call Ava a nurse, not when they thought she couldn't hear. To them, she was the kid in scrubs, too young, too quiet, too careful. The kind of new hire you park in a corner so the real professionals can work. One resident even joked she'd be gone before her badge stopped shining. Then the alarms hit. Not the routine kind. This was the hospital-wide tone that makes the hallway snap into silence. The doors flew open, and a battered U.S. Coast Guard rescue commander was rushed in, barely conscious, the room flooding with orders and ego. But when everyone leaned toward the attending, the commander didn't. Through the haze, he turned his head toward Ava, and with a trembling arm, he raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, into a military salute. What happened in the next 60 seconds didn't just change the patient's fate. It exposed a lie on camera and flipped the entire hospital upside down. They never said it out loud. Not in meetings, not in charts, not where it could be reported. But everyone at North Harbor Medical Center had a name for Ava. The kid, the slow one, the nurse who won't last. Ava was 20 years old, the youngest nurse on the evening rotation, and she moved through the emergency wing like someone afraid of disturbing the air itself. While others rushed, joked, complained, or showed off their speed, Ava walked carefully, checking, pausing, rechecking. It drove people crazy. "Hey, Eva," one of the senior nurses called out one night, not bothering to hide the smirk. "You planning to camp there, or are you actually going to finish that chart?" Eva looked up from the computer, blinking once. "I just want to make sure the dosage matches the updated order," she said softly. The nurse rolled her eyes. "It's already been verified. You don't need to double mother everything." Ava nodded, cheeks warming, and went back to the screen. She always nodded. North Harbor was not a place for nodding. It was a hospital that prided itself on speed, reputation, and sharp edges. Doctors here wore confidence like armor. Nurses competed for recognition. Everyone wanted to look indispensable. Ava did not look like she belonged. She wore scrubs that were always clean but never stylish. Her hair was pulled into a plain ponytail. No dramatic makeup, no loud laughter at the nurse's station, no stories about wild weekends or connections downtown. She arrived early. She left late. And somehow, that made people trust her less. On her third day, Dr. Marcus Hale, a rising star resident with perfect teeth and a louder voice than necessary, leaned against the counter and said just loudly enough, "I give her 5 shifts, max." Someone laughed. Another voice chimed in, "I'll take the under." They didn't know Ava could hear them. She heard everything. She heard the whispers about how she moved too carefully for emergency medicine, how she hesitated, how her hands sometimes shook. Not badly, just enough for sharp eyes to notice. "She's too young," one doctor said. "She's too timid," said another. "She's going to freeze when it matters," Marcus concluded. Eva kept her eyes on the medication cart and pretended she hadn't. Because North Harbor was not her first hospital, and this was not her first time being underestimated. Eva had wanted to be invisible. That was the plan. After nursing school, after long nights studying alone while others partied, after the loan statements and the quiet pressure of being the only one in her family who had made it this far, Eva didn't want attention. She wanted stability, a paycheck, a place to do good quietly. Her instructors had warned her. "Emergency medicine isn't gentle," one had said. "It chews people up," another told her. You need thick skin. Eva thought thick skin meant not needing to be loud. She was wrong. By the end of her first week, she had already been reassigned twice, from trauma bays to restocking, from patient intake to hallway monitoring. Busy work, out-of-the-way work, work that said, "We don't trust you yet." During one late shift, Marcus glanced at her hands as she passed him a file. "You nervous?" he asked. Eva hesitated. "No, doctor." "Your hands shake." She swallowed. They've always done that a little." Marcus smirked. "Yeah, not exactly what you want in emergency care." Eva didn't answer. She remembered her professor's words instead. Steady isn't about stillness. Steady is about knowing what to do when things fall apart. Eva had learned that lesson early in life, earlier than most. The emergency wing hummed constantly, machines breathing, monitors chirping, phones ringing. To everyone else it was noise. To Eva, it was information. She noticed patterns. Which patients were ignored because they weren't dramatic, which nurses were listened to, and which weren't. Which doctors spoke the loudest, and which ones actually looked at their patients. On her 6th shift, she caught a minor chart discrepancy that could have caused a delay in treatment. She flagged it quietly, fixed it without drama. No one thanked her. No one noticed. That was fine. Until the night she overheard Marcus again. He was talking to a small group near the break room. "I'm serious," he said. "If she survives the weekend, I'll buy drinks." "Survives?" someone joked. "You know what I mean," Marcus replied. "This place eats people alive, and she doesn't have the teeth for it." Laughter. Eva stood frozen behind the supply door, fingers wrapped around a clipboard. For a moment, she wondered if they were right. Maybe she was too quiet, too careful, too young. She thought of calling her mother, of quitting before she failed publicly, of finding a calmer ward somewhere inland. Then she remembered why she chose emergency medicine in the first place. Because emergencies didn't wait for confidence. They waited for competence. And Eva had that. Even if no one here believed it yet. At 9:42 p.m., the storm warnings came across the monitors. High winds, rough seas, emergency services on alert. Eva felt something shift. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. She checked her watch. The night was far from over. She straightened the supply cart one last time, aligning everything perfectly, just as Marcus walked by. He glanced at her, shook his head slightly, and muttered, "Try not to get in the way tonight, okay?" Eva met his eyes for the first time. "I won't," she said. And she meant it. Because when the real emergency came, when alarms screamed instead of whispered, when the room stopped laughing, Eva would not be in the way. She would be exactly where she was needed. Eva learned early that rushing didn't make things better. It only made mistakes louder. When she was 13, her father collapsed in their kitchen on a Sunday morning. No dramatic scream, no movie-style chaos. Just the sound of a coffee mug hitting the floor and a body sliding down the cabinet. Eva was the one who found him. Her mother froze. Her younger brother started crying, and Eva, small, shaking, terrified, did the only thing she could think to do. She checked his breathing. She remembered a health class video. Tilt the head. Listen. Count. She remembered the instructor saying, "Panic wastes time." So Eva didn't panic. She called 911. She followed instructions. She spoke clearly even while her hands trembled. Her father survived. The paramedic told her later, "You kept him alive until we got there." Eva didn't feel heroic. She felt quiet. That feeling stayed with her. At North Harbor Medical Center, nobody knew that story. They didn't know Ava had grown up watching how one small oversight could change everything. They didn't know she had memorized procedures the way some people memorized song lyrics, repeating them silently under stress. They only saw a girl who paused. Ava's hands shook because her body remembered fear, but her mind remembered what to do. That distinction mattered, even if no one else noticed. During her second week, Eva was assigned to observation, a section everyone else avoided. Too slow, too boring, too many patients who weren't exciting. Eva didn't mind. She liked listening. An older man with chest discomfort that wasn't textbook. A woman who insisted her pain wasn't that bad, even though her eyes said otherwise. A teenager pretending his injury didn't hurt because his friends were watching. Eva paid attention to details people dismissed. She learned which patients said "I'm fine" when they weren't, which ones cracked jokes when they were scared, which ones fell quiet right before something went wrong. She wrote everything down, and she checked it twice. That habit earned her more eye rolls. "Ava," Marcus said one evening, leaning against the counter. "You know this isn't med school, right? You don't get points for neatness." "I know," she replied. "Then stop acting like one wrong checkbox will end the world." Eva hesitated. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "it does." Marcus laughed and walked away. Ava went back to her notes. She ate lunch alone most days, not because she wanted to, but because it was easier. In the break room, conversations were loud and fast, full of sarcasm and stories about mistakes turned into jokes. Ava never knew when to jump in. By the time she formed a sentence, the topic had already changed. So she sat by the window instead. She watched ambulances arrive, watched families pace, watched nurses rush and doctors posture. She wondered when being calm had become a weakness. One afternoon, Nurse Callie, who had been at North Harbor for over a decade, sat across from her. "You know they think you're scared, right?" Callie said bluntly. Eva looked up. "I am scared." Callie raised an eyebrow. "Of the job?" "No," Eva said. "Of missing something." That answer made Callie pause. For the first time, someone didn't laugh. "Just be careful," Callie said after a moment. "This place doesn't reward quiet competence. It rewards confidence." Eva nodded. She had learned that lesson already. On the night the storm warnings escalated, Eva felt that familiar tightening in her chest. Not anxiety, readiness. She reviewed emergency protocols on her break, even though she wasn't assigned to trauma that shift. She double-checked the supply carts without being asked. A nurse passed by and muttered, "Overkill." Eva didn't respond. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "You working late?" Eva typed back, "Yes. Storm coming. Be careful," her mother replied. Eva stared at the screen for a moment. She almost typed, "I'm always careful," but she deleted it, because careful wasn't what worried her. Being ignored was. At 10:17 p.m., the atmosphere in the emergency wing shifted. Not alarms yet, just tension, the kind you feel before something breaks. Eva noticed staff standing straighter, voices lowered, phones checked more often. A senior nurse whispered, "Coast Guard's on alert." Marcus walked past, energized now, grinning. "See, finally," he said. "Something real." Eva didn't smile. She remembered the kitchen floor, the spilled coffee, the silence before chaos. Real emergencies didn't announce themselves with excitement. They arrived when people least expected them. Ava moved closer to the wall near the trauma bays, staying out of the way like she'd been told. She didn't want attention. She wanted proximity. If something happened, she wanted to see it clearly. From here, she could observe without interrupting. She could listen. She could learn. She watched Marcus take command of the room, barking instructions that hadn't been requested yet. She watched younger residents nod too quickly, afraid to question him. She noticed how no one was assigned to simply watch the patient monitors. Everyone wanted to do something. Few wanted to notice something. Ava folded her hands together. They shook. She steadied them by pressing her fingers into her palm, grounding herself the way she always did. Breathe in. Count to 4. Breathe out. She whispered the words she'd carried with her since she was 13. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. No one heard her. That was okay. Because when the night finally exploded into motion, when doors flew open and voices shouted and lives hung in the balance, Ava wouldn't need to be loud. She would need to be right, and she was ready. The alarms didn't ring. They exploded. A sharp, two-tone siren tore through North Harbor Medical Center, cutting every conversation in half like a blade through glass. Code Gray. Incoming critical. ETA 2 minutes. The emergency wing froze for exactly 1 second. Then it erupted. Chairs scraped back. Gloves snapped on. Monitors lit up. Someone shouted for Trauma Bay 1. Another voice yelled for respiratory. Eva's heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't a drill. This was the alarm no one joked about. Storm-related rescue. High-profile patient. Critical condition. The kind of case careers were built on or destroyed by. Move! Dr. Marcus Hale barked, already pulling on a gown. His voice was sharp, energized, almost excited. This is coming straight from the coast. Everyone on protocol, no freelancing. Eva stepped back automatically, flattening herself near the wall like she'd been trained to do. Out of the way. Invisible. Her hands shook harder now, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She watched the doors. The automatic doors burst open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and salt. Paramedics shouted numbers. A gurney rolled fast, too fast. Equipment rattled. Male, late 30s, severe respiratory distress, oxygen dropping. Marcus was already moving. Bay 1, now. The patient's face was pale, lips tinged blue, eyes half open but unfocused. He wore a heavy jacket, soaked through, cut away at the chest for monitoring. Ava didn't recognize him, but everyone else did. A senior nurse whispered, "That's Captain Rowan Blake." Ava's stomach dropped. Captain Blake wasn't just anyone. He was the head of the State Coastal Rescue Command. The man whose face showed up in press conferences after hurricanes and ferry accidents. The one politicians shook hands with. The room tightened instantly. This wasn't just a patient. This was pressure. "Let's go, let's go!" Marcus snapped. "I want airway support prepped. We're not losing him on my shift." The team swarmed. Too many people, too many voices. Eva stayed where she was, eyes locked on the monitors. Heart rate, high. Oxygen saturation, falling. Captain Blake's chest rose unevenly. One side lagged behind the other. Eva frowned. She leaned slightly to get a clearer angle. Something wasn't right. "Bag him," Marcus ordered. A resident complied. The oxygen numbers barely moved. Ava's pulse quickened. She scanned the patient again. The angle of the neck, the tension in the chest, the way the skin pulled tight with each labored breath. She'd seen this before. Not in textbooks, In training simulations, most people hated because they were too rare to matter, except when they did. Eva took a half step forward, then stopped herself. "You're not assigned," she reminded herself. "Stay out of the way." Marcus was focused, loud, confident. Confidence didn't mean correct. "Airway isn't stabilizing," someone said. "Then increase support," Marcus snapped. "We'll handle the rest." Ava's eyes flicked to the monitor again. The oxygen saturation dipped further. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just respiratory failure. This was mechanical. Pressure. Trapped pressure. Ava swallowed hard. "Dr. Hale," she said. Her voice was quiet. Marcus didn't hear her, or pretended not to. She tried again, louder this time. "Dr. Hale?" He turned, irritation flashing across his face. "What?" "I think there's—" "I didn't ask for input," Marcus cut in. "Please step back." The room went quiet for half a beat. Ava stepped back, but her eyes never left the patient. Captain Blake's breathing grew more erratic. His hand twitched weakly against the gurney rail. The numbers dropped again. Someone cursed under their breath. "Why isn't this responding?" a resident whispered. Marcus clenched his jaw. "Because he's critical, that's why. Stay on task." Eva's mind raced. "If I'm wrong, I embarrass myself. If I'm right and say nothing." She remembered the kitchen floor, the spilled coffee. The silence before it was too late. She stepped forward. "Dr. Hale," Eva said, her voice steady now. "Something's compressing his lung." Marcus spun toward her. "What did I just say?" "Look at his chest movement," Eva continued, pointing, not touching. "It's uneven. The pressure isn't releasing." Marcus laughed once, sharp and humorless. "This is not the time for guesses." "It's not a guess." That stopped him. The room stilled. Ava could feel every eye on her now. "I've seen this pattern before," she said. "He needs immediate decompression support." Marcus stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "You're a first-year nurse," he said slowly. "You don't diagnose." "I'm not diagnosing," Eva replied. "I'm telling you what I'm seeing." Marcus shook his head, incredulous. "Security, keep her back." Eva didn't move. Captain Blake gasped, a harsh, broken sound. The monitor screamed. "His oxygen's crashing," someone yelled. Marcus hesitated, just for a second. And in emergency medicine, a second is an eternity. Ava stepped forward. She didn't shove. She didn't shout. She moved with purpose. One hand stabilized equipment. The other guided a simple, life-saving intervention she had practiced dozens of times in training, always hoping she'd never need it in real life. "Ava, stop!" Marcus shouted. But it was too late. The room held its breath. Then the numbers shifted. The oxygen saturation climbed. Slowly, steadily. Captain Blake sucked in a deep, ragged breath. The sound echoed through the bay. He wasn't drowning anymore. Silence crashed down. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, louder now because no one else was speaking. Ava stood perfectly still. Her hands had stopped shaking. Marcus stared at the monitor, then at the patient, then back at Ava. "What did you just do?" he whispered. Before Ava could answer, Captain Blake's eyes fluttered open. His gaze drifted across the room, past the bright lights, past the cluster of faces, until it landed on her. He looked at Ava, really looked, his brow furrowed as if he were trying to place her. Then, weak but deliberate, he lifted his hand. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't accidental. It was a salute. The room froze. Ava didn't salute back. She simply nodded once. "Breathe," she said softly. "You're safe." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Because in that moment, everyone in the room understood something terrifying. The girl they had dismissed, the nurse they had mocked, the one they told to stay out of the way, had just saved the most important patient in the building, and nothing at North Harbor Medical Center would ever be the same again. The applause never came. There was no moment of relief. No one said good job. No one smiled. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, but the air in Trauma Bay 1 grew cold and sharp, like oxygen had been replaced by suspicion. Marcus was the first to speak. "What did you do?" he repeated, louder now. Eva stepped back half a pace, instinctively shrinking the space between herself and the wall. "I assisted with emergency decompression," she said carefully, "to relieve pressure so he could breathe." "You assisted?" Marcus snapped. "You acted without authorization." "I followed protocol," Eva replied. "The patient was deteriorating." Marcus laughed once, harsh and humorless. "Protocol." He looked around the room, seeking allies. "Did anyone ask her to touch my patient?" No one answered. A resident avoided Ava's eyes. A nurse stared at the floor. Someone busied themselves adjusting equipment that didn't need adjusting. Captain Blake lay breathing steadily now, sedated and stable, unaware that the room had turned into a courtroom. Marcus squared his shoulders. "Security," he said. "I want her out of this bay." Eva felt the words hit before the guards even moved. "I didn't interfere," she said quietly. "I responded." Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You embarrassed me," he said, "and you don't get to do that and walk away." Security stepped forward. Eva raised her hands slowly, palms open. "I'll leave," she said, "but he's stable because we acted in time." Marcus scoffed. "We'll see about that." They escorted her to the hallway. Not roughly. Worse, politely, like she was already guilty. The doors to the trauma bay slid shut behind her with a soft hiss that sounded final. Ava stood there, heart racing, replaying every second in her head. Had she been wrong? No. She knew she wasn't. She'd seen the pattern, the signs, the response. Her hands shook again, but not from doubt, from what came next. It didn't take long. Less than 20 minutes later, a supervisor appeared. "Eva," she said, not unkindly. "Administration wants to see you." Ava nodded. She'd expected this. What she hadn't expected was Marcus already waiting there when she arrived. Cleaned up, composed, in control. They sat her down in a small conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Glass walls, too bright. No privacy. Across from her sat Mr. Lawson, the hospital's operations director, and Ms. Kerr, head of nursing compliance. Marcus took the seat beside them. Ava remained standing. "Please sit," Ms. Kerr said. Ava did. Lawson folded his hands. "Ava, we're here to discuss an incident that occurred in Trauma Bay 1. Marcus jumped in immediately. "She acted independently," he said, "without clearance, without instruction. She physically intervened during a critical procedure." Eva looked up. "I intervened because the patient was failing." Lawson raised a hand. "Eva, please, we'll get to your perspective." Marcus continued, voice smooth. "So this patient is a public figure. Any deviation from protocol exposes this hospital to enormous liability." Eva felt something sink in her chest. This wasn't about medicine. It was about optics. I followed emergency guidelines, she said. I didn't override orders. I supported the patient. Marcus leaned back. She panicked. Eva turned toward him. I didn't panic, she said quietly. Ms. Kerr glanced between them. Eva, she said gently, did you receive direct instruction to perform that intervention? Eva hesitated. No. Lawson nodded once. There it is. But there wasn't time, Eva said. He was losing oxygen. Seconds mattered. Lawson sighed. Intent doesn't override chain of command. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The meeting ended quickly after that. Too quickly. Lawson slid a folder across the table. Effective immediately, he said. Your employment at North Harbor Medical Center is terminated pending review. The words echoed. Terminated. Eva stared at the folder. I saved his life, she whispered. Lawson didn't meet her eyes. We're not disputing the outcome, he said. We're addressing the process. Marcus stood. Security appeared again. This isn't personal, Marcus said, straightening his coat. It's professionalism. Eva looked up at him. You didn't see it, she said. Marcus paused. See what? The patient, Eva replied. You saw your reputation. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Then it hardened. Escort her out. The rain had started again by the time Eva reached the locker room. Harder now. Louder. She packed her things into a cardboard box someone handed her like a receipt. A stethoscope. A notebook full of careful handwriting. A small photo of her family taped inside the lid. That was it. No goodbye. No explanation to the nurses who had watched her walk out of the trauma bay like a criminal. She passed the emergency entrance just as an ambulance arrived. She wondered who would watch the monitors now. Outside, the wind cut through her scrubs. Eva pulled her jacket tighter and walked toward the bus stop. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Captain Blake. They said you're gone. I want to speak to you. Eva stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. Please. She swallowed hard. Tears blurred her vision for the first time that night. She typed back with shaking fingers. I'm not at the hospital anymore. She stepped onto the bus just as the doors hissed shut behind her. North Harbor Medical Center disappeared into the rain. Eva sat alone near the back, clutching the box on her lap, replaying Marcus's words. You embarrassed me. She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking, but she knew the truth. They had shaken, and then they had saved a life. Whatever happened next, Eva had done the right thing, even if the world punished her for it. Captain Rowan Blake woke to the sound of breathing, not his own, machines, steady, rhythmic, unforgivingly calm. For a moment he thought he was still at sea, still caught between waves and darkness. But then the ceiling came into focus. White. Too white. Lights humming softly above him. Hospital. His chest felt tight, wrapped, heavy. Something tugged faintly at his side with each breath. Blake blinked slowly, his mind piecing itself together in fragments. Rain. Cold. Hands pulling him up. A pressure in his chest that felt like drowning on dry land. And then, her. He remembered her face more clearly than anything else. Young, focused, calm in a way that cut through panic. Breathe, she had said. Not loudly, not desperately, just certain. Blake swallowed, throat dry. Nurse, he croaked. A young woman at his bedside startled. Captain Blake? You're awake. I'll get the doctor. No, he said weakly. The nurse, the one with the quiet voice. The nurse hesitated. You mean Ava? Blake nodded once. Yes. The nurse's expression shifted, uneasy, apologetic. She's not here. Blake frowned, pain creasing his brow. What do you mean not here? She glanced toward the door, then back at him. There was an issue, she said carefully. She was dismissed after the incident. Blake's heart rate spiked on the monitor. Dismissed. For what? The nurse lowered her voice. They said she went outside protocol. Blake stared at the ceiling, disbelief hardening into anger. Protocol. He remembered the suffocating pressure, the way the room had blurred, how close he'd been to slipping away. She saved my life, he said hoarsely. I know, the nurse whispered. Blake closed his eyes. He had spent his career pulling people out of impossible situations, storms, wrecks, fires, watching how systems failed when ego got in the way. He had seen this before, just not from a hospital bed. Get me administration, he said. The nurse bit her lip. I don't think... Now, Blake said, the command slipping through despite the weakness in his voice. Within the hour, word spread. Not loudly, not officially, but fast. A senior administrator arrived with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Captain Blake, he said warmly, we're relieved to see you improving. Blake looked at him. Where is Eva? The smile faltered. She's no longer employed here. Why? The administrator cleared his throat. There were concerns about her judgment. Blake laughed once, a low, incredulous sound that hurt his chest. Judgment, he repeated. She was the only one in the room who had any. Silence stretched. Blake shifted slightly, wincing, but his gaze never left the man's face. I want the report, he said. All of it. The monitors, the footage, the timeline. That may take some time. Then take it, Blake cut in, because I'm not signing a single statement until I speak to her. The administrator nodded stiffly and left. Blake exhaled slowly. For the first time since waking, he felt fully present and fully furious. Ava was sitting on the bus when her phone rang again. She hadn't answered the first time. She didn't think she could. But when the same number appeared again, she picked up. Hello? Ava, a man's voice said, strained but steady. This is Rowan Blake. Her grip tightened on the phone. Captain, she said softly. They told me you were fired, he said. Eva looked out the rain-streaked window. Yes. For helping me breathe. Yes. A pause, then quietly. I'm sorry. Eva closed her eyes. I didn't do it for thanks, she said. I know, Blake replied. That's why I'm calling. She could hear sincerity in his voice, the kind that came from someone who knew what it meant to owe their life to another person. They didn't listen to you, he said. No, Eva agreed. They didn't. Blake inhaled carefully. They will, he said, because I won't let this go. Ava hesitated. You don't have to do anything, she said. I broke the chain of command. You followed the chain of survival, Blake replied, and that matters more. The bus rattled over a pothole. Eva steadied the box on her lap. They think I panicked, she said quietly. Blake snorted. I've seen panic. What you did wasn't panic. It was precision. Eva swallowed. No one had ever said that to her before. I want you back at that hospital, Blake continued. Not because of me, because people like you don't belong on the sidelines. Eva looked down at her hands. They were still, For the first time all night, they were still. "I don't know if they'll let me," she said. Blake smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Ava," he said, "they don't get a vote anymore." By morning, the hospital felt different. Nurses whispered. Doctors avoided eye contact. Administrators paced. A formal request had come in, not from the press, not from donors. From Captain Rowan Blake himself. He wanted Eva present for his official statement. He wanted her name on the record, and he wanted a review of the night's decisions. Marcus Hale read the message twice, his jaw tightening. "She's a nobody," he muttered. But deep down, something cold curled in his stomach. Because the man in the hospital bed wasn't just grateful, he was powerful, and he remembered exactly who had helped him breathe when everything else failed. Eva stepped off the bus as the rain eased into a mist. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. For the first time since she'd arrived at North Harbor, someone had truly seen her. Not as a risk, not as a mistake, not as a quiet inconvenience, but as what she had always been. A nurse who noticed, and a woman who didn't look away when it mattered. Hospitals were built to heal people, but when fear entered the room, they behaved like corporations. At North Harbor Medical Center, the morning after Captain Rowan Blake stabilized, the hallways were quieter than usual. Not calm, but cautious. Conversations dropped to whispers. Emails were reread before being sent. Doors closed more often than they opened. In the executive conference room, the blinds were drawn. Mr. Lawson sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, staring at a glowing screen. Across from him sat legal affairs, risk management, and compliance. Titles that only showed up when something had gone very wrong. "This is not a press issue yet," one lawyer said. "But it will be." Lawson nodded. "Captain Blake has requested a full review." That sentence landed hard. Not a complaint, not a question, a request, from someone whose requests tended to become obligations. Down the table, Dr. Marcus Hale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. "This is being blown out of proportion," he said. "The patient survived. That's the outcome." "That's not the standard," compliance replied. "The standard is how the outcome occurred." Marcus scoffed. "She acted without authorization. That's all you need." The room didn't respond. Lawson cleared his throat. "We've already pulled the trauma bay footage," he said, "and the telemetry." Marcus straightened. "Footage?" "Yes," Lawson replied. "Every trauma bay records continuously." Marcus forced a smile. "Then you'll see I was in control." No one echoed the sentiment. And the screen flickered. Timestamp 22/1947. The video played without sound at first. Captain Blake lay on the gurney. The team clustered. Marcus gestured sharply. Numbers scrolled on the side of the screen. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, respiratory effort. "Pause," the legal counsel said. The image froze. "Rewind 30 seconds." The video rolled back, this time with audio. Marcus's voice filled the room. "Stay on task." Another voice, quieter. "I think something's compressing his lung." The room stilled. Lawson leaned closer. "Who said that?" Compliance didn't look up. "That's Nurse Ava Collins." Marcus shifted. She was guessing. "Let's keep watching," the lawyer said. The footage continued. Ava stepped forward, not rushing, not panicking. The monitor alarms escalated. "Pause," compliance said again. She pointed to the telemetry. Oxygen saturation dropped 8 points in under 10 seconds. Risk management frowned. But that's significant. Continue. On screen, Eva acted. Seconds later, the monitor changed. The numbers climbed. Captain Blake inhaled deeply. The room was silent. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Elapsed time, 18 seconds. Lawson swallowed. That intervention stabilized him. Yes, compliance said. And according to emergency nursing guidelines, it was appropriate. Marcus leaned forward now. She still violated chain of command. Legal turned toward him. Doctor, she said calmly, chain of command does not supersede imminent loss of life. Marcus opened his mouth. No sound came out. The video ended. No edits, no spin, just data. Lawson leaned back in his chair. She didn't panic, he said quietly. She acted decisively. Marcus's jaw tightened. She made me look incompetent. The word hung there, incriminating. Legal wrote something down. That's not a medical defense, she said. Across town, Eva sat at her kitchen table, laptop closed, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Eva Collins, a woman said. This is Dana Brooks, counsel representing Captain Blake. Eva straightened. Yes? We're conducting a formal review of last night's events, Dana continued. Your actions are central to that review. Eva swallowed. Am I in trouble? There was a pause. No, Dana said. You're protected. Eva exhaled slowly. We've requested all footage, Dana added. And we'd like your statement. Eva nodded, even though the lawyer couldn't see it. I'll cooperate fully, she said. We know, Dana replied. That's why this matters. Back at North Harbor, pressure mounted. Emails arrived from state oversight. Insurance representatives requested clarification. A formal inquiry was opened. Lawson called Marcus into his office. This isn't about you anymore, Lawson said. It's about exposure. Marcus paced. She's a junior nurse, he said. If we let her override physicians... She didn't override, Lawson interrupted. She corrected. Marcus stopped pacing. If this goes public, it won't, Lawson said. If we handle it correctly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. And how do you suggest we do that? Lawson hesitated, then said the words Marcus feared. We bring her back. Marcus stared. You can't be serious. Lawson didn't blink. Either we acknowledge her competence, he said, or we explain why we punished it. That afternoon, Captain Rowan Blake signed his statement. It was brief, precise, unambiguous. Nurse Eva Collins identified a critical failure that others missed. Her intervention restored my breathing and stabilized my condition. Any claim that her actions were reckless is false. The document ended with a single line. I trust my life to people who notice. Lawson read it twice, then a third time. The truth didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It simply existed. With timestamps, with footage, with data that could not be argued away. And for the first time since Eva had walked out into the rain, the balance of power shifted. Not because she demanded it, but because the truth had nowhere left to hide. North Harbor Medical Center had never felt so still. The main lobby, usually filled with rolling carts, murmured conversations, and the constant rush of people who never had enough time, stood frozen, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Nurses lined the upper balcony. Residents gathered near the elevators. Administrators stood stiffly by the front desk. hands clasped too tightly. No one had announced what was about to happen, but everyone knew something was coming. The automatic doors slid open. Captain Rowan Blake entered slowly, escorted by a nurse and a physician, moving with the careful precision of a man whose body was still healing, but whose will was already ahead of it. He wore a simple jacket over his hospital clothes. No cameras, no press, no speeches prepared, just him. And behind him, hesitant at first, then steadier with each step, walked Ava. She wore clean scrubs this time, hair pulled back the same way as always, no badge of rank, no special title, just her name. Whispers rippled through the lobby. That's her. The nurse. The one from the footage. Ava felt every eye on her, and for a moment, the old instinct returned. Shrink, step back, disappear. But Captain Blake slowed and turned slightly, making sure she stayed beside him. Not behind, beside. They stopped in the center of the lobby. The elevator chimed behind them. No one moved. Mr. Lawson stepped forward, throat tight. Captain Blake, he began, voice formal. On behalf of North Harbor Medical Center? Blake raised a hand. Not sharply, not angrily, just enough. No, he said. This isn't about statements. He turned instead, scanning the faces above and around him. Doctors, nurses, students. I've spent my career in emergencies, Blake said. His voice carried without effort. I know the difference between noise and action, between authority and responsibility. He gestured gently toward Eva. When I couldn't breathe, he continued, this nurse noticed what others didn't. She acted when time mattered, and she did it without asking for credit. Eva felt her chest tighten. Blake paused. Then she was dismissed. A murmur spread, uneasy, ashamed. I asked for her back, Blake said, not as a favor, as a correction. He turned fully toward Ava. The room watched. Slowly, carefully, Captain Blake straightened his posture. Pain flickered across his face, but he didn't stop. He raised his right hand. Not in a wave, not in gratitude alone, in a formal salute. Sharp, deliberate, unmistakable, a military salute. Time seemed to stop. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't asked for it. For a heartbeat, she stood frozen, 20 years old, surrounded by people who had doubted her, watching a man she had helped breathe offer her the highest form of respect he knew. Then Ava did something no one expected. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She met his eyes, and she nodded once. A quiet acknowledgement. Not above him, not beneath him. Equal. The silence shattered. Applause rose from the balcony, hesitant at first, then louder. Nurses clapped, residents joined. Someone near the back wiped their eyes. Even those who had once whispered stood and applauded. Not because they were told to, but because they understood. Marcus Hale watched from the edge of the crowd. He didn't clap. He couldn't. The salute replayed in his mind like a verdict. He had wanted authority. Eva had earned respect. Lawson stepped forward again, voice steady now. Eva Collins, he said, North Harbor Medical Center formally acknowledges your actions and invites you to return. Eva raised a hand this time, just like Blake had. I'll come back, she said. The room leaned in. But not to disappear, Eva continued, and not to be quiet when something's wrong. Lawson nodded. Agreed. Eva looked around the lobby, at the nurses who'd been afraid to speak, the residents still learning, the building that had almost chosen ego over life. I don't need a title, she said. I need a culture where listening matters, Blake smiled. That was the answer he'd hoped for. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Callie, the veteran nurse, caught Eva's arm. "You okay?" she whispered. Eva nodded. "For the first time," she said. "Yes." She glanced once more at the space where the salute had happened. Not because it changed who she was, but because it proved something important. You didn't have to be loud to be strong. You didn't have to rush to be brave. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room was the one holding everything together. Marcus Hale believed in optics. He believed in confidence, posture, and the right tone of voice. He believed that if you spoke first and spoke loudly enough, people assumed you were right. For a long time, that belief had worked. But optics only mattered until the record spoke. And records didn't care how impressive you looked in a white coat. 2 weeks after the salute, North Harbor Medical Center felt different. Not quieter, more deliberate. Eva noticed it immediately. Morning briefings were no longer one-sided performances. Residents paused before speaking. Nurses were invited to finish their sentences. Questions were asked and answered without sarcasm. Eva had not been given a grand title. She didn't want one, but she had been given something far more powerful: a seat at the table. She helped redesign trauma check-ins, introduced a silent watch role. One person assigned to do nothing but observe monitors and patient response during critical moments. No ego, no hierarchy, just attention. The results spoke quickly. Fewer near misses, faster corrections, calmer rooms. Eva never announced these changes. She simply implemented them, and people followed. Marcus noticed too. He noticed when residents stopped echoing his opinions automatically, when nurses no longer rushed to obey without question, when the room didn't tighten when he entered. At first, he told himself it was temporary, a phase, a reaction to pressure, but then came the email. Subject: Residency Program Review, Mandatory Attendance. Marcus read it twice. His stomach tightened. The meeting room was full when he arrived. Lawson sat at the head of the table. Legal beside him. Compliance. A representative from the State Oversight Board. Eva was there too. Not as an accuser, as a witness. Lawson didn't waste time. "Dr. Hale," he said, "this is a formal review of your clinical conduct during the Blake incident." Marcus straightened. "I've already explained." Lawson raised a hand. "We're past explanations." The screen behind them lit up, the footage again. This time slowed, annotated, timestamps, telemetry overlays, decision points highlighted in red and green. No drama, just facts. A member of the review board spoke. "You dismissed a valid concern without assessment." Another added, "You prioritized authority over evaluation." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. Because for the first time, the room wasn't reacting to him. It was judging the evidence. Eva was asked to speak. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at the board. "I don't believe Dr. Hale intended harm," she said calmly. "I believe he believed speed and confidence were enough." Marcus flinched. "But emergency medicine isn't theater," Eva continued. "It's listening. And when we stop listening, patients pay for it. No accusation, no anger, just clarity." The board nodded. The decision came an hour later. Marcus was removed from the residency fast-track program. Not fired, not publicly humiliated. Something worse. Reassigned, supervised, required to complete remedial training under a new protocol, including instruction led by Eva. The first session was awkward. Marcus arrived early, stiff, arms crossed. Ava entered quietly, carrying a tablet and a notebook. She didn't acknowledge him at first. She addressed the room. "This training isn't punishment," she said. "It's recalibration." She paused. "Everyone here is capable, but capability without humility is dangerous." Marcus felt every word land. He wasn't singled out. He didn't need to be. Karma didn't shout. It positioned. Weeks passed. Marcus complied. He learned. Slowly. Painfully. He watched Ava work. How she spoke last, not first. How she asked questions that revealed answers instead of forcing conclusions. One afternoon, after a session ended, Marcus lingered. "Ava," he said. She turned. He hesitated, then spoke. "I thought being in charge meant never hesitating." Eva studied him for a moment. "It means knowing when hesitation saves lives," she replied. Marcus nodded once. It wasn't an apology, but it was the beginning of one. On a quiet evening shift, Captain Rowan Blake returned to North Harbor. This time without escort. He walked easily now, breathing freely. He stopped at the nurse's station where Ava was charting. "Still watching the monitors?" he asked with a smile. "Always," Eva replied. He nodded toward the trauma bays. "They listen now." Eva glanced around. "Yes," she said. "They do." Blake extended his hand. Not in salute this time, in gratitude. "You changed this place," he said. Ava shook her head. "I just paid attention." From the balcony above, Marcus watched the exchange. He didn't feel resentment. He felt something unfamiliar. Respect. Not given. Earned. And he understood, finally, what the cost of being loud had been. He'd almost missed what mattered. Eva ended her shift the same way she always did. She checked the monitors one last time, straightened a cart, turned off a light someone had left on. No applause, no ceremony, just quiet competence. And that was enough. Because North Harbor no longer belonged to the loudest voice in the room. It belonged to the ones who noticed.